Okay, I think we'll get started. Welcome everybody. I just want you to know that this evening's talk is being recorded. So if you would please just make sure that you keep your microphone muted until we go to the questions and comments section. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we stand today, and also to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I invite you to do the same from wherever you may be tuning in this evening. Before I hand you over to Dr. Deleuze, I just want to give you an idea of how the session will go. Dr. Deleuze is going to give her talk and show a short video clip, after which she'll ask you for your comments and questions. Then she'll finish her talk and we'll put you into breakout rooms to use the worksheet that you were sent. Now, I do suggest that you have that worksheet handy so that you make the most of the breakout rooms. And also, if there are any questions for Dr. Deleuze related to that, you can certainly ask those in the Q&A sessions. But for now, I have the great pleasure of handing you over to Dr. Rena Deleuze. Thanks, Rena.
Thanks, Carmen. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Carmen and PDP, for organizing our community professional event tonight. So I hope tonight is not only a sharing of content, but actually a space for us to think about our work with our clients in the context of empathy. And I hope that it's not also just an introspection, but a sharing of ideas and meeting other people across Australia. So let me begin by showing my favorite quote on empathy from Brene Brown, which is empathy is communicating that incredibly healing message of you're not alone. I hope that this is something that we're making our clients feel when they talk to us and when they actually are in the therapeutic room with us. It is being with the client more than anything else. So empathy, just for a refresher in the context of our topic tonight, predominantly in empathy models, there are three components, which is number one, ability to recognize our emotions and other people's emotions through communicative cues, such as our facial expression, speech, and behavior. And empathy is also has a cognitive component as well, which is the perspective taking. So it is our ability to take over another person's perspective while essentially distinguishing ourselves and the other. And the other component is the affective component, which is the sharing of emotional state. So that means it's our ability to share or experience emotions as others. As probably you've heard, empathy is very important in therapeutic relationship. In fact, there are researches and studies that says and revealed that empathy or the therapeutic relationship seeks therapeutic benefits and leads to positive outcomes. However, an empathy rupture can happen, and this is along the lines of lacking the emotional bond or the workable bond between the therapist and the client. And it is also about misattunement, misalignment, or lack of agreement within the therapeutic space about tasks and goals in therapy. It is inevitable, and you may ask why, because when you actually think about our own relationships, whether in our personal lives or our professional life, a relationship always has a potential for conflict. So the same in the therapy room, it is also a relational space. So Technically, in literature, empathy rupture is empathic disjunctions. And disjunctions are those times in therapy when the client and therapist miss and confuse each other, thereby failing to meet in the relational phase. It's also about reflecting differently the organized subjective worlds of two people and two people experiencing the same psychologically meaningful event in highly discrepant ways. So this brings to mind someone has approached me recently and was looking for a therapist. And when I was speaking with a potential client, she was saying that she thinks her therapist understands her, understands her issues. But however, she says that the therapist is rushing her to get back into her feet and to get better. So this is an example of an empathic disjunction where two people experience the same psychologically meaningful event. So in my view, they both have an understanding of what the issue is, but they're experiencing it in highly discrepant ways. So in short, there is a lack of agreement in the tasks and goals, but it looks like there seems to be a work on because the client has seen the therapist for around 3 times already. So if you're curious, I didn't accept the client. I did suggest though with the client, it might just be helpful for her to actually discuss this with the therapist. And I hope that that has been sorted out in the therapeutic space. So client and therapist may also miss each other's meaning or intent, lost or confused, or may reach a stalemate, which is called the impasse, which I'll be presenting to you in a little while more about it, and can be hardly noticeable to intensely obvious within the clinical hour. So what does this mean? So perhaps when an empathic disjunction happens and the client would react or express oneself in a hostile or angry manner, for example, the client would say, I'm upset with the conversation, or you upset me. This is more of a confrontational reaction from the client. So it is therefore obvious. However, some of empathic disjunctions can be less obvious. And I'm sure this is not the only reason why clients leave therapy, but at times it could be a possible reason that they withdraw from therapy, or they can actually stay in therapy and continually engage, but have started to express anxieties and doubts over the therapeutic process. So again, it's unavoidable in therapy because it is again a relational space. And so it is ubiquitous in any relationship we have that includes the therapeutic space. So I'm going to talk more about impasse, but I think what would best illustrates impasse would be a video that I'll show in a little while. So impasse happens when the clinician significantly alters the meaning of the client's experience to fit his own organization of experience and or vice versa. So there's no meeting of the mind and heart, dissonance results, change is blocked, and there's a failure to meet effectively or cognitively. And so after watching the video, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and feelings about the video. Comments most welcome, and Carmen will show the video in a sec. All right. Carmen will unmute you, and I hope it's also clear what an impasse looks like. So that's an impasse. So the first steps in having the capacity to repair empathic disjunctions would be the following that I will say. I won't be able to actually give you the techniques today, but let us know in the feedback form if you're actually interested with techniques. And that's something probably Carmen and I can talk about further in the future. But for the context of the first steps is that in order for us to have the capacity to actually repair empathic disjunctions, is to embed empathy ruptures or empathic disjunctions in the context of reflecting in our work or embedded in our clinical practice in terms of awareness. So what does it mean? So the following circumstances that I will share to you, or situations, have potential clinical implications in terms of therapeutic alliance. So first is observe yourself when you're about to see a client. Well, we are only humans, so we sometimes look forward to see a particular client, but at times we may have strong feelings when we're about to see, and that's not quite unusual. And also notice when you're actually feeling stuck in therapy. And this is probably my own favorite cue point for me, because every time I go to my own supervision, it's something that I discuss with my supervisor, that I actually talked about empathic disjunctions in the context as well of like how I feeling in terms of being stuck, feeling stuck with the progress of the client, or feeling stuck with how can I relate with the client. And although I did mention that one technique that Dr. Melfi could have used is clarification, but overuse of clarifications as a technique can actually lead to therapeutic disruptions as well, or empathy rupture, because then the client may probably feel interrogated rather than feel understood. And so also notice if you're reacting differently with this particular client. That are you working more than you should with this particular client, or are you underworking? So these are clues. Plus, notice how you are in session. Does it mean in session, do you get bored, or does your mind wander off? And I know it's not quite easy when we're attuned with the client, because therapy actually requires our full attention and being attentive. But aside from the obvious, it's probably worthwhile to also be aware of your internal processes when you're actually with a client. And these are situations or incidents that can be dealt with by the clinician in the process of reflective awareness through introspection, supervision, and or peer review. So the other thing to be aware of is the awareness of transference and countertransference. So as we know, transference is our client's attempt to organize the therapeutic relationship to something familiar from their history. And for us, the countertransference is about our unconscious attitudes and behaviors towards the client. And at times, we would notice that in therapy, the client may remind us of someone else that is also from our history, or unresolved issues that we have had in our history. Or it could happen after therapy, wherein we notice how we are during the session. I actually think transference and countertransference are rich material in therapy. And this is something that can actually be dealt with as well through our own self-awareness and bring it out in peer review or supervision. And some clinicians go to therapy themselves. And so therapy is not only exclusive for our clients. In my view, it's actually part of our self-care if you actually think you can benefit from it. And this reminds me so much of a Johari window. And for those who are not familiar with the Johari window, the window has 4 panes. And the first window is the open self, wherein what I know about myself, other people know. And the other window is the hidden self, wherein I know something about myself that other people don't know. But there is also the window, which I call is a blind spot, wherein we are not aware of something about ourselves, but other people are aware. And therapy may be able to address that, but at times supervision can also address that. So the benefit of making empathic disjunctions as part of your clinical practice in terms of being aware of it would help us self-write. So self-awareness is not also exclusive for our clients. It's also very much encouraged, in my view, for therapists, that self-awareness helps the therapist self-write. It's also recognizing and utilizing disjunctions can enhance and free our therapeutic work from inevitable impasses which block change. And so with Dr. Melfi, I don't see it's a gloom and doom. I'd like to think that the client has been there for quite a while, because he did say that I feel trapped here forever. And so the empathic disjunction that has happened in that particular session is something that can be addressed, if not on that particular session, the next session. And it can actually be something to be explored. So hopefully by embedding awareness of empathic disjunctions in our clinical practice, it will increase our capacity to explore of the interaction with the client and be brave enough to explore the interaction with the client. And this can lead to deepening therapeutic engagement, wherein it can shift the therapy into something more beneficial for the client. And at times, it is a corrective emotional experience for the client. So I think what is the best example at the moment in my head is that, let's say the client is presenting with symptoms of depression. And as time goes by, you've gotten to know the client, that the client is conflict avoidant. And an empathic disjunction happened in therapy. And hopefully the therapist is able to address that appropriately. And so the client may actually be able to respond or feel or interact differently than the usual experiences she has with conflict. So it will provide her a different relational experience. And by providing a different relational experience, the client hopefully would be able to normalize conflicts as ubiquitous in any relationships. And by that awareness and that feeling of it's okay to have a conflict and that can be resolved, hopefully that insight will generate behavioral and cognitive changes. So I hope that was a useful content for all of you. And I'm now quite curious how you're actually going to bring forth what we just learned in terms of content of what is empathic disjunction or empathy rupture as we go to the breakout room.